we certainly want to keep in mind Laudato Si, the writings of Pope Francis. And I want to turn for just a few minutes to sort of how this afternoon all came about. Earlier this year, as the team learned and thought more and more about Pope Francis's Laudato Si project, calling the whole church to participate in a 7-year concerted effort to actively work to protect our planet, the common home of all creatures. We remembered the clear importance the Ohio province placed on this issue when, about a year and a half ago, maybe 2 years ago now, we discussed the matters of greater importance in anticipation of a yet-to-be general chapter. That issue, that whole question of care for the planet resonated with the province, and we listed it among our greatest concerns. Pope Francis has raised it up for the entire world, and the question now is, how do we become actively involved? To prepare for a discussion on how we might do just that, I asked Teresa Phillips, our province coordinator for justice, peace, and care of creation, to pull together a small committee, which she did. It included Carol Lichtenberg, Marilyn Kerber, Liz Boyer, Marianne Barnhorn, and Carmen Silva. And we asked them to look at how we might become more involved as a province, to develop for us considerations, a framework for involving each of us as members of the province in Pope Francis's global initiative. That initiative is of such importance for our continuation as a planet. And Pope Francis's initiative has been recognized in national announcements, international announcements, and is being launched on the 25th of this month worldwide, so that we can have a year of planning over the next year, 5 years of implementation, and a year of celebration. And I'm going to turn it back to Teresa now to share with you the program that the committee has planned for this afternoon to give us a framework of how we as a province might become more and more involved in this consideration, and to lay out recommendations that as a province we can decide whether or not and at what level we want to be involved. Teresa?
Thank you, Donna, so much for that and for inviting me into this process. So when the advisory committee got together, we started talking about how to communicate all this and decided on this all province presentation. We asked ourselves who could root this in scripture for us and give us context. And to a woman, the sisters on that committee, the name Camilla Burns popped out of everybody's mouth. So, so we asked, and she said yes, and I'm going to invite her now to share with us her thoughts. Thank you, Camilla.
You're welcome. I'm coming. much stuff here. Ooh. My screen sharing stopped, Teresa.
Okay. Let me see if I can pull it up. If you want to start, I'll look. You sent this to me? Did you send-
Wow. I even lost my PowerPoint. Woo.
Can you reopen your PowerPoint from
I'm working on it.
from your original menu? Maybe. Teresa,
Sorry for
are you sure that you have given screen sharing?
Yes.
Okay.
You and she are both co-hosts, so she could screen share if she can pull up. You can
I mean,
pull
I
up
checked-
your PowerPoint
I
again.
checked this 3 times this morning, but that's is the way it goes.
I have something that says cancel the spotlight on Camilla's screen. Is that a problem?
Let's see. I can do that. Maybe that is the problem.
I've never seen that message before.
Oh, hold on.
It also says recording. I don't know if that's interfering with anything.
No, that's, yeah, we're recording this for everyone. So.
Yeah, it doesn't usually show up on the screen though.
It's coming slowly, slowly.
If you want to email it to me, Camilla, I can pull it up on my computer if you'd like. It could be Wi-Fi as well if you're having Wi-Fi issues.
Yeah, the sound is not great for me here, but but I'm getting it.
Okay.
Whew. I think my computer is dying of old age, but never mind, it's coming.
Well, that you could solve. Well, you know,
Yes, next year,
that's some-
next year's budget. It promises me that it's starting. And it's opening.
drives you crazy. Ah,
You hear something?
mm-hmm. Sounded promising.
Yeah. It's arriving.
Maybe.
Wow. Now, Teresa, I don't have share.
It didn't give you it. You still should have the permission. It's given you the permission.
You know how it's not showing up.
Technical difficulties are so much fun.
Oh,
So you're marked as a co-host. It should be on your screen that you can share the screen. Let me ask.
yeah, I do. I know. The truth is,
Should you just go ahead and make her the host, Teresa?
I can if she can make me the host back, just because then I have to make you. Okay. Can you try it now? Does it come up?
I am now the host.
Do you have your screen share at the bottom then?
No,
Yeah, I think that might be on your end.
maybe I ought to just go out and come back in. I'm really sorry for this delay, but
okay.
I don't have, I lost
can-
it.
we can hop to Carol's part and then,
Okay,
yep, that would be fine.
For the sake of time, why don't we do that?
Okay.
yeah, okay, I'll be back.
Okay.
We'll just reverse the order, huh, Teresa?
Yeah, I think so. So I will move on to what we were going to say about Carol. So we're gonna skip and have Carol come to the virtual podium now. Being well versed on how things work in the province, we asked her to organize a way to introduce this. The action platform that's coming out of the Vatican is pretty complex. So, with her original Ministry of Teaching Biology and Earth Science, we thought she would be the perfect person to introduce this to us. And so I'm going to hand it over to you, Carol.
Thank you.
Mhm.
Let's see if my screen share works.
I hope so.
Is it working?
It is.
All right. From the beginning. So the Laudato Si action platform, as Donna described, is this multi-year approach to get lots of people involved in addressing the climate crisis. Now, one of the monikers for this program was Sowing Hope for the Planet. LCWR seems to be using that. Have you lost hope? Do you believe there's a crisis and that we need to take action without delay? Well, always a few facts to help. 2020 of the 22 most recent years are the warmest on record. We know we're seeing more catastrophic weather. We know that the Earth's air or surface temperature is warming, and we know that the oceans are warming. The Earth's atmosphere has warmed a little over 2 degrees Fahrenheit in the last 100 years. We know this affects animals and plants, and so puts species at risk of extinction. Since 1950 and the intense industrialization, there's been a 46% rise in carbon dioxide emissions. Why is that important? Because it's the carbon dioxide that traps heat. That's what's causing the warming. The Paris climate would like us to keep our temperature from rising any further, but maximum no more than a little over 2 more degrees. So is there a crisis? Look at this graph. I borrowed this from another presentation. What it shows you, the dotted line is the one Earth. What that means is the Earth could break down the waste and produce the resources at a rate that equals our use and dumping of waste. We crossed that line in 1970. Now it takes 1.5 Earths, almost 1.6, to produce the resources that we use in 1 year and to break down the waste. So it takes 1 year and 8 months to break down what we produce in a year. That's obviously not sustainable. That a lot of scientists are talking about 2030, pardon me. 2030 is a crossover year. We'll take 22 Earths or 2 years to break down every 1 year of waste and produce every 1 year of needed resource for the Earth's population. It seems to be a critical date, the way the scientists are talking, that year 2030. So that's not a lot of time. So yes, I believe you could make a very rational case for the fact that there is a climate crisis. All the scientists agree, except for the deniers who are another breed of people. 95%, they can trace this by microscopic studies of the carbon dioxide in the air. 95% is due to human activity. mainly the burning of fossil fuels, coal, oil, and natural gas. Deforestation, you know, trees, remember your freshman biology, trees absorb carbon dioxide to do photosynthesis. That helps, but we're cutting down trees, and trees have a cooling effect. So of course the earth continues to warm. Then there's the problem of the plastics. That is really getting a lot of attention these days. One statistic I found said that there are 8 million tons a year of plastic put into the ocean. 8 million tons. That's the equivalent of 5 garbage bags of plastic on every square foot of coastline in the whole world. 5 garbage bags on every square foot of coastline. I mean, that's pretty daunting. As the population in the world grows, more food it needs to produce, and the way we produce food, particularly cattle, does contribute to greenhouse gas emissions, not to speak of the fact that we buy peaches from Peru and look at all the energy used to transport food from such a far away place. We live in a throwaway culture that we're adding to landfill and new production. Every time we throw it away, it has to be produced again. That's more energy. And humans who deny it, who dismiss it as, well, it's you know, we got years before it's going to be a problem. Well, those days are over. We used to be able to put it off with a little more rational approach, but so there really is a crisis. I hope you agree with that. Now, we haven't ignored it. All of us are probably doing something, you know, like recycling, trying to reduce plastic, trying to conserve water, combine our trips when we can, you know, less use of the car. Eating less meat does help the environment because of the intensity of the grain production to feed the cattle, so that eating less meat helps. And all of us probably do some of this in small or larger ways. But what if we could do more? What if we could become part of the global initiative, as Donna mentioned, and as this plan of action around Laudato Si is shaping up to be? What if we could do more? Here's why we should do more. You could pull 100 quotes out of Laudato Si. These just happen to be 2, and I'm sorry, I don't have the paragraph numbers. I forgot to write them down when I found them. I urgently appeal then for a new dialogue about how we are shaping the future of our planet. And a second quote from Pope Francis: our goal is to become painfully aware. Okay? That means this is not an easy task. To dare to turn what is happening to the world into our own personal suffering, and thus to discover what each of us can do about it. Our Constitution's Article 65, gratefully aware of the goodness of God's creation, we reverence the resources of the earth. We are careful to use them in a spirit of stewardship to foster the life of all people. Not just rich people, not just people who can produce and overconsume. Foster the life of all people. Recent chapter calls, it's been there for a number of chapters, but 2014 was, our last chapter was pretty insistent. We choose to stand with people made poor in a world marked by increasing divisions and inequalities. We see the value of human life diminished, the destruction of earth, and intolerance toward people perceived to be different. This is an early statement in the chapter calls, an overarching statement. So you see the concern about the earth right up front. And then further, the chapter says in the action-oriented section, impelled by the ecological crisis, we examine every facet of our relationship with the community of creation. Every facet. Do you feel guilty when you step on a spider? You know, that's one of the facets. And I have mixed feelings about it. I never know what makes me guilty when I do it. All members and units of the congregation commit to take action on this defining issue of our time. So units and each of us as individuals, the chapter committed us to take action on the ecological crisis. So I'm going to describe the invitation to become part of this larger project, just in a little more detail than Donna had the opportunity to do. So it's called a number of things, but it seems like the main title of the whole effort is Laudato Si Action Platform. So it has the intent to develop plans for conversion. We're going to have to change our behavior if we're going to address the crisis. And for action for integral ecology for the whole church. I explained integral ecology was a new phrase to me. I'll give you a take on that in a minute. So this initiative comes from Pope Francis. This is the 5th anniversary of Laudato Si. That's part of what got this going. And it's from the Union of International Superiors General and the men's group, the equivalent men's group, and the Vatican Dicastery for Integral Human Development, which is to say that's the Vatican Justice and Peace Office. And part also is the Global Catholic Climate Movement. By the way, if you're looking for a place for good information on the crisis, Catholic Global Climate Movement is a great website. Okay, so we've been invited. Here's the idea of integral ecology. Say that 3 times. Integral ecology. The idea is that we're not just hearing the cry of the earth, we're hearing it in combination with the cry of the poor. The crises are all connected. So we broaden our focus. Of course, sustainable environmental ecology is, you would think, the main idea, but it also has to do with the protection of human life. It has to do with solidarity with those who are poor. It has to do with things like urban planning, which is, the people socialization part, particularly working with people to have a meaningful, full life that is healthy and respects the environment. And of course, the sense that humans interact with nature. And how many people who live in the urban areas in a downtown have nature to even, go for a walk where there are trees and grass. So integral, we need to keep our focus broad. So we've got this invitation from all those groups, the Vatican and the UASG and LCWR as well. So that's where, we got this committee to help Teresa figure out. And so at the end here, we'll talk a little bit about what we think the next steps are once you get at least a small grasp of what the whole plan could mean. So here are the main points of the Laudato Si Action Platform. So as Donna mentioned, it's a project of the whole church. The church, the Vatican feels that they can identify 7 groups that could work cooperatively within the group and then across the groups. So families, communities, education, hospitals and health, business and farmers, other kinds of organizations in the church, and religious orders. We're not last. They think we're the most important. I don't, maybe they did it. Now they didn't even do it alpha. But anyway, we're not really last. Here's a little fact. There are 1.2 billion Catholics in the world, according to a recent count, that we're 15% of the Earth's population. What if all of these groups could really create a critical mass that would make a difference. That's the idea. And the church believes religious orders can be at the forefront. We already have influence. We already have, at times, taken a prophetic stance. Even the essence of our vocation is to be prophetic. And we have charism and spirituality that grounds our efforts to make a change in our world for the good of humankind. So we're being seen as really important in this effort. So it's a 7-year timeline. Donna mentioned this. So they see everybody, if they can get themselves organized, they see everybody getting their planning started in the first year. But there probably will be some people that won't get their planning started till the second and third year. But anyway, then there's time to carry through the plans and then, as we say, celebrate the differences. And if you think of this, if we get started in 2022, 7 years from that is 2029, which brings us very close to that critical year of 2030, which is a target to reduce our carbon footprint in order to save the earth. So there are 7 goals. There's 7's, the magic biblical number. So we have 7 groups and 7 years and 7 goals. So I'll just do a quick run through of the goals, and you'll get the feeling here of a little more of the integral part. But of course, you would think the main one is the cry of the earth, to make a carbon neutral footprint, not to be emitting carbon dioxide, not to be using fossil fuels and or offsetting the use of fossil fuels. Protecting biodiversity as part of this goal. Greater use of clean and renewable forms of energy and access to clean water, which is on our agenda already. So that's goal 1. Goal 2 is a response to the cry of the poor. So the defense of human life, all stages of human life, and all other forms of life. It's a little funny to think of defending the cicadas who are going to drive us nuts, but that's part of creation. Attention to structures that cause poverty, that's part of what we've been about for years. But how that molds and melds with the ecological efforts. Attention to vulnerable groups, they particularly mention indigenous peoples, who've been so badly treated and given in this country parts of the earth that are very difficult to grow food from, but also migrants and children, vulnerable groups. Prevention of all forms of modern slavery. That's part of the goal to hear the cry of the poor. The next goal is ecological economics. Sustainable production. If we're making a product that we think is now important in our lives and it's from a non-renewable resource, or if it's creating waste that lives in the environment for eons, that's not sustainable. Fair trade, we're familiar with that. People get a fair return on their efforts. Ethical consumption, you have to ask the question, is the US ethically consuming vaccines by hoarding? And then investments in low carbon footprint and renewable energy companies. We have the Charitable Trust Board of the province that oversees our investments is just going to start. I'm still on that board, so I'm kind of needling for us to start getting, although our stock managers are aware of carbon footprint related to the companies we own, but we're getting a little stronger in our request to learn more and manage our investments to help the environment. The 4th goal, how am I doing on time, Teresa? Okay, adoption of simple lifestyles. Again, that's a part of who we are, that constant challenge. So a restraint in the use of resources. Let's avoid the single-use plastics. Let's get the plastics out of our lives as much as we can. Public transit would help so much if we could ever get reliable systems in some of the cities where we live. Less and use of less polluting forms of transportation, like your feet, you know, to the local store. And then, as I said earlier, more plant-based diet. These actions under the goals are not mine. They have been proposed by all of the committees working on this. So goal 5, education. Do some work so that curricula focus on integral ecology. Create ecological awareness activity in schools. Prepare teachers so that in all disciplines, not just the science teachers. There must, you know, we could find ways that we could deal with, bring ecology into all disciplines and promote ecological careers among our students. Goal 6 is ecological spirituality, that religious vision of God's beauty and creation. The second one about the spirit of wonder, joy, and praise. Just go out on a spring day. You must have done that these last weeks and just see a tree in bloom. It's just an incredible experience of God if we allow ourselves to get lost in it. Creation-centered liturgical celebrations, ecological catechesis resources, that's a challenge to develop those. The 7th goal is that we all want to be in this together. We want to promote advocacy. We want to work with, if some other group, well, like the associates, you know, working alongside of us. So we need to collaborate so that we increase the effect of our efforts by overlapping, have some rootedness in our local ecosystem, and then wherever we can form partnerships with our schools, let's say, with our neighborhood. These are all things we're going to need, we look forward to exploring. So that's a quick rundown of the 7 goals. I just want to read you this statement. This is the Union of International Superiors General. This is how they stated their commitment. And I think has a certain power to it. We commit ourselves to both personal and communal conversion. And we wish to move forward together in an orchestrated and coordinated response in listening to the cry of the earth and the cry of the poor as we go forth as instruments of hope in the heart of the world. So they've committed. Do we want to commit? That's the real question today. So, you know, we're starting the conversation today. We, the committee, plans to have circles be the next step. We will provide some questions and ask that circles meet in June to discuss whether we want to commit to this 7-year action plan, whether we want to get serious about trying to take some concerted effort to improve our common home. And as the circles, at the end of each circle in June, we're going to ask you to specifically state if you support the province joining. We don't want to just gloss over whether for some reason we all don't want to go forward. Then if we have a majority of support, either this committee or some committee will start the work of planning. You got to ask yourself if you don't need some kind of mini strategic planning effort here to figure out how we do want to respond to all the possible initiatives. So do we want to commit? That's an important question for today that we hope you will answer in June. We expect you to answer in June, one way or the other. I should really say it that way. So if we commit, though, we will need to do some work. We'll need to learn, we'll need to pray, we'll need to do whatever action we can take. We know it'll take time. There are no plans of any sort currently existing for how the province could do this. So it's going to take time and effort. When we do it, if we do it, we'll make it public. We've been asked to make it public. The sponsors really want the sense that we're achieving a critical mass so that we are aware. And then we'll evaluate, as we go along. So you already heard who the committee is that's helped pull this together. So let us sow hope for the planet in whatever way we can as we go forward. That's all I have to say, Teresa.
Thank you, Carol. If you can unshare your screen, that would be great.
Thank you. Finding me. Stop. Bang. There we are.
Now we're going to, Camilla has assured me she's regrouped, and we are going to hear from her and kind of giving us a theological context and context in our province calls and who we
Thanks.
are. Sisters. Thanks, Camilla.
To make up for the time.
No problem.
My role is to try to give us some tools in order to enter a few different angles on the Bible in order to enter more fully into these conversations that we are being asked to make. And what I plan to do is honor what Pope Francis has said over and over again, is that we need integral theology. And a way to understand that is it has to include the mind and heart. And I hope to engage both your mind and your heart today. He also said we need the science and the art. And I have a little bit of art today. Faith and the whole spiritual life of culture. Certainly faith. What I would like to offer today is another way to think about things. And I also believe that this, what Pope Francis calls the spiritual life of culture, is slowly evolving into really the care for the planet, which is creation theology, or a spiritual life of creation. And that's in the culture, and it's growing and growing. So I propose to think about the Green Bible. Just another way to think about that book you know so well. So put on your sunglasses, your green sunglasses, and we'll look at the Bible through green glasses. One of the ways that is suggested that we think about the Bible is that it spans from creation in first Genesis to the New Jerusalem in Revelation. So the whole span of the Bible is really from creation to new creation. What you probably were educated to, and this is still very acceptable, is to think of the Bible as salvation history. It's the story of how God enters into history and participates, and we participate. It's that story. And that's a very acceptable way to do it, but creation is another way to look at the Bible. Salvation history was dominant in the 20th century. And again, I want to say it's a very acceptable way to approach the Bible. It's God's presence in our history. And there's a recurring theme of failure, salvation, failure, salvation. You can just think about how you understand the Bible. You know, everything's going well and bam, it falls apart. And then there's a kind of a new coming together, and then it falls apart. As one commentator said, the Bible can really be called crisis and story. And just to give you a little flavor of how we looked at salvation history, We start the book with creation, and the next thing you know, we're being put out of paradise. Then through a much longer time, but by the time we get to the end of Genesis, we're in slavery in Egypt. And then, of course, we go through the process of Exodus. We get to Exodus, to the promised land, and Exodus itself is an ordeal, but we get to a new moment in the promised land. We get to the promised land, and after several centuries, it begins to be occupied by foreign countries. And the occupation leads eventually to exile, leaving the country, and then the story is the story of return. So that's and I suspect that's one of the ways you learned about this book, that it's the story of crisis and story. There's even a textbook in the Old Testament called Crisis and Story. And of course, we get to the New Testament. We have the death of Jesus, and we're now celebrating new life. So that's a very acceptable way to think about the Bible and of course, how God enters into our own life, of our own stories of crises and story. But I would say at the end of the 20th century, until now, the focus of many, many scholars of the New Testament are on creation. Part of that, I think, is being prompted by what we're experiencing in the global climate crisis. So there's many, many more commentaries now from the point of view of creation. So I'm offering you a few of the ideas to begin, if you haven't done this, to begin to think in terms of creation when you pick up the Bible. So we say, many commentators say that the dominant theme of creation is theology, is creation theology. The dominant theme of the Bible is creation theology. You can also look at it through salvation history, but another way is, and that's when I suggest you put on your green glasses. So there's a new pattern. It's not so much crisis story, but we have a new way of talking about that. Creation, obviously, the whole Bible starts with two stories of creation. And then there is sin, and we refer to it as decreation. So we're given this wonderful creation, and we harm it. And the way we have in creation theology to talk about sin is decreation. And then we make amends, and there's recreation. Think about that, recreate, recreation. And then it ends in new creation. So it's another way to think about the pattern in the Bible. In creation, whatever we do is decreation, and we have all contributed to that in terms of the planet. Recreation, what can we do to assist in the decreation of our planet? And new creation, how can we make this new creation? In Genesis 1:1, this is a typical recent interpretation or translation of this. You know, we're used to saying in the beginning, blah, 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 blah. But at the beginning of God's creating of the heavens and earth, that's another little different slant. And the point of the translator is to say that creation continues. You know, when God took a nap on the seventh day, it wasn't over. So the focus now on understanding that creation at the beginning, when God started this whole thing moving, and it continues, it continues. We need to think of creation as alive and moving and being, not something dead and we're trying to resurrect. It's always continuing. And the effects of that beginning that we all know so well from the story of Genesis still does continue. Now, this is just especially for the SMDs. When God saw the light, we all know this, and God said that it was good. Perfectly acceptable translation. However, the Hebrew for that it was good is kitov, and that is often translated as how good. Now we have rights to how good. I mean, it's in our DNA. So another way to think about creation is kitov, how good it is. That occurs 40 times in the Bible. So how good is the good God is biblically based. I'm just kind of giving you a flavor and going kind of quickly through this. In Proverbs 8, we have an extraordinary appearance of wisdom personified as a woman. And it says, she speaks in the first person. And this is not an attempt to be inclusive. It is. The Hebrew is she. And she says, the Lord created me at the first of his work, the first of his acts of long ago. And sometimes that word create is birthed. The Lord birthed me, the first of his acts of long ago. Ages ago, I was set up at the first, before the beginning of the earth. Now we got a little issue here. We start out with Genesis at the beginning, God creates the world. And then we get to Proverbs, and wisdom says, I was there for it. Before any of that happened, I was there. So how do we reconcile these? Well, I'll tell you how the ancient Jewish scholars did it, and it's being resurrected again today. These manuscripts go back, they're really old. They're probably as far back as the Babylonian exile, which is 5 centuries before the birth of Jesus. And instead of saying in the beginning, they say, with wisdom did God create and perfect the heavens and the earth. In the beginning, with wisdom did God create. And here's the clincher. Philo of Alexandria, he was a contemporary with Jesus. He lived in Egypt, a mystic, and he said, by using different names, Moses indicated that the exalted heavenly wisdom has many names. He calls it beginning, image, and appearance of God. So there's a long tradition of understanding beginning as wisdom. Philo even said it's a nickname for wisdom. Now you can transfer that over to the Gospel of John. In the beginning was the Word. With wisdom was the Word. And beginning occurs a lot in the Bible. And then, just to move on a little bit quickly here, in Genesis 1:26, God's going, everything's in the first person, third person singular. God did this, and God did that, and God did that, and God did that. And all of a sudden, in Genesis 1:26, then God said, let us make humankind in our image according to our likeness. Well, where'd that come from? I mean, what happened here? Everything was just God doing all this. And suddenly, and this is a very accurate translation, God said, let us make humankind in our image. For centuries in the Christian tradition, that is interpreted as wisdom and God. Wisdom tradition went out of focus for a while, but of course it's being reclaimed in a huge way, partly driven by our concern for the planet. Now, just to show you how this has affected Christianity, This is something very familiar to all of you, Michelangelo's Sistine Chapel, the creation of Adam. And probably what attracts your attention is Adam and God, and certainly the strength of those hands. But look at God's left hand, at his left arm. He's got that hooked around a woman. And it's not Eve. She did not witness Adam's creation. So that far along in the Christian tradition, we held the awareness that wisdom was at creation. In the beginning, with wisdom. Now, I get the creation Psalms, when any scholars take the Psalms and put them into categories, there's always a creation category because so many of the Psalms. So I can only suggest 3 creation Psalms. Psalm 145, it celebrates the completeness of creation. Psalm 104, the goodness of creation, probably is special for us. And Psalm 136, we're earthed and connected. We're earthed and connected. And that's got that famous refrain, for God's steadfast love endures forever. It reads like a litany, which we think it originally was. For God's steadfast love endures forever. But it's a celebration again. All of these are creation, but there's a lot more in the Psalms. So just a few minutes on the New Testament. I can't do that. I can't leave that out. In Jesus's healings and parables, they are understood to be God's action in creation. Sometimes we just look at the action and we forget the context of the action. So I think of the parables as a choral piece. They can be heard with several different voices. So one voice will talk about the kingdom of God becoming present. And the other is, the focus is that in creation, the kingdom is coming to pass. In the 4th chapter of Mark, there are 3 parables on the sowing of the seed. There's the sower that casts the seed. There's the growing of the seed, the root, the shoot, and the fruit. And then there's the mustard seed. And we typically think about that with the deeds of Jesus. The good beginning has been made that will be revealed in the reign of God. Jesus comes and proclaims the kingdom. And we understand that seed is the beginning of this kingdom. But at another level, the parables open our eyes to the reality of creation. This kingdom is being established through creation. So how sacred that is to Jesus when he gives his parables. I think I'm just about making it. There's so much more to be said on all of this, but the next thing will be Christmas. So let me just close with this image. This is Fra Angelico, and it's his picture of Jesus and Mary at the tomb when she went looking for him and found the empty tomb and then mistakes him for the gardener. It's a beautiful picture. Fra Angelico often imitates Giotto in his paintings, but he always adds something different. He always makes a little in his paintings. And in this one, look in Jesus's left hand. There's a hoe. There's a hoe. And it's true, Mary thought he was the gardener, so it wouldn't be the gardener have the hoe. But I think for us, we have to look at that a little bit differently. I think we have to pick up our hoes and think about what we can do with this splendid creation that we are contributing to the decreation. How can we recreate? And how can we create a new creation? So that's just a few thoughts on the prominence of creation in the Bible. It's amazing when you start to look for it, how many places you will see it. So let's pick up our hoes together as a province. Let's unite our energies and let's sow hope together in this climate condition. So I would say, pick up your green Bibles, take up your hoe, and let's go. Thank you.
Thank you, Camilla. That's wonderful. I wish I had had a pair of green glasses I could have actually put on when you said that. Pick up our hose and goes. Thank you so much for that. And thank you, Carol, as well. We did promise an hour. If you want to indulge us for a few more minutes, we want to open up for any questions for clarification. If anyone needs some clarification or has questions, we want to offer that for you. You can write it in the chat because we will save the chat. And then if we don't get to the question, we will get in touch with you. Or if you don't want to bother with the chat and you want to verbalize your question, we're open for that as well. So if we have if you have a few more minutes to stay on, then please do. And if you have any questions, I have a couple of screens here, so I'm going to go through them. But if you want to kind of raise a hand at me, then I can call on you if you have questions. Regina, so you have to unmute yourself.
Okay, this is not a question, but a request.
Okay.
Both Carol and Camilla did such a great job, but I'm one of those learners that I have to see the written word as well as hear the vocal. And is there any way that, and I don't want to put a burden on either one, is there any way that we can get a piece of the script so that we can, reflect on it a little more?
Isn't this being recorded?
Yes, but I won't have, I don't know how I could get it, Camilla. I don't want to hear it again. I want to read something. I want to see some paper. If it isn't a problem, if it's a problem, then that's fine.
Oh, no, it's very easy. I'll post my, my PowerPoint. It's very easy to do that. So,
Okay.
yeah, I'll just put it on OHS&D only.
Okay, thank you.
Are you putting your PowerPoint on, Carol, or a chat or a commentary?
Just the PowerPoint.
Oh, you can have the PowerPoint, yeah. I thought you was asking for more.
Oh, yeah, I didn't write a script per se, so.
I didn't
No,
either.
but it would help, to refresh what you've done.
Sure, no problem.
Thank you.
Wonderful.
Where do you want us to put that PowerPoint? On Ohio?
Ohio,
SND only.
Ohio Circle, I guess. Ohio Circle, so associates.
Okay.
Other questions, anyone? Don't see any hands, so and I don't see any in the chat. So you saw the list of who's on the committee. You can direct if it's easier, just direct your questions to me via email or phone call or whatever. And we can always address those. So you will see for the sisters, you will see on Ohio SND only the document that we're going to put forward for your consideration for your June circles. That will happen within this week. we are asking you to discuss them and to reply to those circle response committees on first class. For the associates, I will be in conversation with Annie and how this can go forward with the associates. Yes, so that's that piece of it. But we would love to hear from you all, and we are hoping, I'm hoping as the coordinator for Care for Creation, that we get a great big yes. But I shouldn't salt the pot that way. So I'll stop. So anyway, so thank you all very much. And thank you for indulging us before. Oh, Donna, I'm sorry. I see your hand. Go ahead.
Now, I just want to, at the end, tell you that I think all of us would want to say a huge thank you to you, to all the members of the committee, and especially to Carol and Camilla for the wonderful presentations this afternoon. I think this has been an incredible beginning. So thank you.
Fantastic. Thank you. And thank you for all of everything everyone is doing and I look forward to doing the work that this is going to require for all of us and for all of the small people running around this planet. So, okay, thank you all very much. And I did not plan an ending for this, and I'm finding myself not knowing what to say except goodbye.
Or you can say Happy Pentecost. Tomorrow is
Oh,
Pentecost.
that's right. Happy Pentecost.
Let the Spirit flow.
Yes.
Amen. That's the best, Carol. Thank you. Let the Spirit flow and pick up our hose and let's go.
Right.
Flow, ho, go.
Yep. Good.
Kathy Harmon, are you waving or are you trying to talk to us?
She's waving.
Oh, okay.
Thanks, everyone.
Okay. Thank you all. God bless and have a lovely rest of your weekend. Bye-bye.